In this video, I'm going to show you the very basics of how to cook isomalt and get it from this form into the form over here where it's crystallized. This is cooked, and the good thing about isomalt is that once you cook it, you can break it up and put it in a little bag and just keep it, and then when you need it, you can reheat it, and you don't need to worry about it crystallizing, and it's a lot easier to handle than sugar. It's not as tricky, and it's not as temperamental. So that's the benefit. This, like I said, is powdered isomalt, and you can get this at cake supply stores, and you can buy it online. The way that I do it, the proportions that I use is about 2 1/4 cup of isomalt, which ends up being about a pound, and about 3/4 cup of water, which is right there. And you need to use a pan that is relatively large. Don't use a real shallow pan, because when it gets to a certain temperature, it'll bubble up. And I've had isomalt all over my stove before, and you don't want that to happen. So I'm going to turn this off right now and start it again over at the stove, because I don't have anything to prop this up on, and it's just going to be really shaky if I start moving it around. Alright, one thing to remember is that you should use distilled water if you can, and that will have fewer impurities in it than tap water, and it will keep the isomalt from being kind of discolored. Keeps it a little clearer. Also, you want to use a spatula that's really clean. Don't use a wooden spoon, because again, it has impurities in the wood, and that can get into the isomalt and kind of discolor it. So when you put the water in there and you start to stir it up, it's going to seem like there's not enough water, but once you start working it around, it really does absorb pretty well, and it'll melt everything. Once it gets to a point where it's all stirred and incorporated, you can get ready to heat it up. This pan is spinning all over the place. Alright, see, it's pretty swampy right now. Alright, so I'm going to turn the heat on, and you need to use a candy thermometer for this. I'm sure that some people know how to do it and tell exactly when the temperature is right, but it usually doesn't work. So I've tasted a lot of grainy fudge from ladies who say, oh, I just look at it and I know when it's ready, and they really don't. So get a candy thermometer and turn the heat up to high, and I will show you when it gets to 340. That's when you take it off the heat. Okay, so I have my pan all set up. It's heating up. And just an FYI, if you're getting a new stovetop, these glass stovetops are terrible for cooking sugar, because the thing cycles on and off all the time, and you're not supposed to get sugar on it. It's a mess. So anyway, I hate the stove, but that's beside the point. So put the thermometer in, just leave it alone. It's all stirred up. You don't need to worry about washing down the sides and all that. It's really not that big a deal. And leave it until it gets to 340. When it gets to 340, what you want to do is have a pot of water in the sink ready. So over here in the sink, I have waiting for me a pot of cold water, and what you're going to do is take the pan when it gets to 340 degrees and put the bottom of the pan into the cold water. You can put ice in this if you want, but the cold water works just fine. And that will stop the isomalt from getting hotter, and it will stop the cooking. So you want to do that to get it to stop at that point, because you don't want it to get hotter than that. Now while that's heating up, over on the counter that I started on with the measuring cups, what I have is all my silicone mats. I have a sill pad, I have some Teflon mats. If you don't have these many mats, or you don't have any, you can use hard candy molds and just pour it in, and then once they cool off, you can break the pieces up. But this is where I'm going to pour the isomalt out once it's at the right temperature, and then we'll break it up and put it into the bags. Okay, so it starts out looking really milky, and it's been about 2 minutes. I have the temperature up on high, and it's starting to dissolve. So you can see as it starts dissolving around the edges, it's going to start looking translucent. And if you just leave it alone, it's fine. You don't need to sit there and stir it. You might want to stir it if it looks like it's getting too hot in a certain spot, but it's alright. It looks like the edges in the center are doing okay. And you see that by the thermometer, it's getting up to about almost to 150 at this point. So just keep an eye on it, and it's making a nice little pattern in the middle. Keep an eye on it when it starts to really bubble. Just watch it, because, like I said, it will bubble up. If there's too much in the pan, it'll bubble right over, and you want to pull it off the heat. And that's not good, because that makes a huge mess. Okay, it's starting to boil now, and it is about 200 degrees. And so you want to keep an eye on that. But it comes a point, it'll hit a point where it kind of stops heating up, and it just gets really slow. So don't worry about that. Looks like it's gotten cooler all of a sudden. What the heck? Oh, you know what? Like I said, this oven cycles on and off. So that's very annoying, but it's okay. And it could just be that the thermometer's in a little spot where the temperature isn't reading it accurately either. So I'll move that around a little bit and see what it says. Now it's getting hot again. Okay. So just let it boil. At this point you want to watch it because this is when it's going to overflow if it overflows. Like all of a sudden it'll take off and kind of go crazy. It looks alright. I think sometimes I try to cook like 2 pounds worth, and that's just too much. The pot can't handle it. So just do 1 pound at a time at the most, and you should be okay. And try to use a taller pan. Don't use a little tiny pan. Okay. And right now it's gone up to almost 250. And I'm going to turn this off until it gets close to where it should be. And I'm going to say how long that takes from this point too. I'm going to watch the clock. Okay, it's been about 4 minutes and the temperature hasn't budged at all. So if that happens, don't worry, that's normal. It gets to about the boiling point and it sits at the same temperature for a long time. And it was actually about 225, it wasn't 250. So if you are doing this and it does that, don't worry about it because that's going to be normal. Also, I wanted to mention when you take the isomalt out of the pan, you need a clean spatula, and you have to make sure that the silicone mats that you're pouring it out on, or whatever you're pouring it out on, are also clean because you're going to be reusing it later and you don't want to get it dirty. So make sure whatever you're pouring it out onto is clean. And let me see. At this point, it's just a little bit over 225, and it's been almost 5 minutes since I got it to the boiling point. So don't worry, it does take a long time. Once it starts climbing, the temperature goes up really quickly. Okay, at this point it's bubbling kind of more slowly. You see the bubbles are getting kind of smaller and larger. I mean smaller and thicker. And it's about 250 degrees and it's climbing slowly, but it's starting to climb. And at this point you can just kind of keep an eye on it. You don't have to worry too much because it's going to take a while to get up to where it goes. Once it gets up to about 275, 285, it's going to start climbing faster, so you need to watch it. If you're cooking sugar, you need to be really careful because once it gets to about 300 degrees, you should take it off the heat and put it on the water. But for isomalt, you take it up a little bit hotter. And with the sugar, you have to be careful about the crystallization too, but isomalt won't do that as easily. I've never seen it crystallize, but I'm sure that it can be done, depending on what you put into it. If you're going to put color into this, I would wait until you've cooked it and use a gel color because it seems to work better. Don't use too much liquid color. It will color it, but it'll make it sticky if you put too much color in when it finally does cool off. So for the isomalt, just try to stick with the gel colors and you'll be better off. And at this point, I'm just going to wait until this gets up a little bit closer to where it should be. It looks like it's about, let's see, about 265 or so at this point. Okay, this is getting close to 300 at this point, and if this was sugar, you'd be getting ready to take it off the heat right now and sticking it in the pan of water. But since it's isomalt, you want it to get hotter, and so we're just going to leave it alone. And you see how the bubbles are really thick at this point, and the temperature is very slowly but steadily rising, so you don't want to walk away from it now because you're going to come back and it'll be completely encrusted all over your pan, and that would be really bad. One thing I was going to say while we're waiting to get to the 340 mark, some people will take a bowl or a pan that can go into the oven. If you take isomalt and just turn the oven on real low, like 250, you can actually leave a pan of cooked isomalt in the oven, and that'll keep it warm enough to pour so you don't have to keep reheating it. Okay, and I just reheat it. I let it cool off and then reheat it as I need it in tiny batches because it's easier to do it a little bit at a time. And now you see how the temperature is really starting to go up. I'm trying not to wiggle this too much. What I'm going to do is when it gets to 330 or 335, I'm going to stop filming and take it off the heat and stick it in the water. And then I'll try to pour it while I'm filming it just to show you how to do it. But it's kind of a two-handed endeavor, so I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to put on the film. But it's pretty straightforward. Take it off the heat, turn the heat off, take it off the heat, stick it at the bottom of the pan in the pan of water, then dry the bottom of the pan that has the isomalt in it before you pour it out so the water doesn't get all over it. Now you see that crystal, there's like a white crystal behind the thermometer, kind of to the left of the thermometer. If this was real sugar, you'd be looking at that. Okay, I'm going to take this off the heat in about 2 seconds, so I'm going to turn this off now. Okay, here we are in the little pan of water. And it's nice and cooked. And that just keeps it from getting hotter than it was. It cools off the bottom of the pan. And once that's been there for a minute, just dry that off. Dry it off on that. And we're going to take this. I'll try to do this with one hand. I'm going to take this over to the mats and just pour it out. You can wait until it thickens up a little bit if you want. The bubbles in there will go away if you just let it cool off a little bit. Since I'm just going to use it and break it up, I'm going to pour it right out because I'm going to be reheating this. So I'm just going to pour it out all over the mat. If I need more space, I'll move over to this mat. This is a Teflon mat that I got a long time ago to line cake pans with, and I've never been able to find them again. So if anyone knows where to get them, let me know because they're very useful. Okay. And then you can take a spatula and just wipe the extra out of the pan and also put that on the Teflon also. Alright, so I scraped the pan with this little spatula, which now has Isomalt all over it, but that's the idea. You just want to get as much out of the pan as you can because that stuff is expensive. It can add up if you waste a lot. So that has it all over it, but I'm just going to leave it to cool off because once it cools off I can break it off with the spatula and reuse it. So now you have it on your mats and it's cooling. And if you had gel, like the jewel molds, gem molds, that kind of thing, you can pour it directly from the pan into the mold depending on how comfortable you are with that. Or you can put it into a Pyrex measuring cup that has a handle so that you can use that and pour it with the spout. And what I use to pour the, I reheat it once it's broken up into the pieces like this. When there's small pieces like that, I just put them in a, like the little flexible cupcake holders, the cupcake shaped things that you put cupcakes in. And you can put those in the microwave just a small amount at a time and melt it, and then you can pour it into the molds with using the cupcake as a spout because you can bend the silicone. And that's it for now. So when this cools off, I'll show you about breaking it up and we'll store it for future use. Once the isomalt is cooled down, you can just pick this up and break it. Okay. You have to be careful because these pieces are like glass, they're sharp, and they will cut you. This will cut you, so be careful with that. But all you need to do is break it up into little pieces and then get a clean Ziploc bag and store it in there. If you want to put like a dish towel over it and just bang it with a hammer, you can do that. And the spatula, like I showed you this before, that the spatula had the isomalt on it from the pan, and all you have to do with this is just peel it right off because you can use that later. Alright, so you just get the little shards, and then what you do once you have all this collected, when you need some isomalt, you can just go into your little bag and pull out what you need. And this is the same as using those cake plates. Basically all they're doing is cooking this stuff for you ahead of time. Let me see. Here is... I'm trying to reach one of these little things. This is a little cupcake thing, these little silicone cupcake holders. This is the only good thing these are good for, so I don't make cupcakes, but this is what I use these for. You can put the isomalt in here, stick this in the microwave. I turn it on, I fill it up pretty far, like halfway. Stick it in the microwave for about a minute, and just watch it. When it starts to bubble up and boil, and the isomalt melts again, turn it off, and very carefully pull this out, because if it's up here, and you have hot isomalt all the way up here, it's hot, it will burn you, so be really careful. So just, pick it up like this with 2 fingers and pull it out, and then once it cools off to a certain extent, and you can pour it, you can hold it like this and pour it out that way, and make a little spout. It'll go off the little ridges, and it'll be really easy to pour into the molds. So that's how I do it. If you want to color it, you can put a little bit of coloring into the little cupcake holder before you put the isomalt in there, and then melt it in the microwave. And then you can stir it up a little bit. And this method is really good because this isomalt, as opposed to sugar, which will crystallize on you and you'll ruin it, this stuff you can heat over and over and over. And it really is a very good way to get the sugar look without having to worry about all the tricky things that. So that's the video. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments section. I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. These are some things I was messing with before. I made these little jewels with a jewel mold, and see, they're red. It's 2 types of isomalt in one. This is a little stained glass thing. If you pick it up, you can see that the isomalt is like the glass through there. And this is another jewel mold. And cooking it like this is good because you can do it once, put it in the little bags like this, just hold on to it until you need it, then you don't need to cook it every single time. Just do one big batch and you'll be done. And I also sell this in my Etsy shop, so if you go to etsy.com/shop/a cake to remember, you'll find it in the supply section if you don't want to go through the whole process of cooking it yourself. But it's really easy to cook. There's no reason that you would need to buy it from someone. Those little cake play sticks are basically this, and they just put the little gun, which is really unnecessary. It's just an extra step. But it's easy, and you can get some fun things. You can do some fun things with them. Jewels on cakes are really cute, and it's a lot shinier than gun paste would be. And you can decorate these with luster dust and stuff also. You can paint on them. Alright, so I hope that was helpful, and just leave comments and questions in the comment section if you need to.